Thanks for staying and joining our mobile developer productivity panel to close out another great DroidCon conference here, and want to introduce the folks on the panel. I'm Rooz, I'm from Gradle, and I helped put this developer productivity track together for the first time this year with Greg and the whole DroidCon conference committee, so I hope you all enjoyed that. And it's always fun to have a panel and have a nice interactive session, and we talked about, hey, who can we put together to share their developer productivity and developer experience learnings from some of the well-known apps. And Ty Smith, my partner in crime, him and I run the San Francisco Android user group and GDG or Meetup, whatever you want to call it, together. And he speaks regularly on developer experience and works on developer experience at Uber. We have Jun Peng, who works on developer experience at Meta, and Ben Schwab, that works on developer productivity, developer experience at Airbnb. And we have Lauren, not Aida. She couldn't be here. She had an emergency. So Lauren, thank you for last minute jumping in, and she is from Reddit. And we'll do intros. So let's kick this off. First topic, just to kind of set it up, give us an introduction about how your developer productivity org is organized. What's the org chart look like? How many developers are you supporting? What's your tooling stack? And let's start there. Ty, why don't you take that one?
Sure. Thanks, Rooz. So at Uber, we, our mobile apps are kind of the bread and butter of our business. So we do have a lot of Android and iOS engineers, and a lot of those folks are kind of polyglots. So not everybody's a dedicated Android or dedicated iOS engineer. So sometimes it's hard to actually say we're supporting X number of engineers. We do track the monthly active contributors to our mobile repos, and for Android, that's something like 350 to 400. If you scale that up a little bit more to like a 6-month time frame, we're probably at 600 to 800 contributors. So it's somewhere in that range that we're kind of supporting. Our organization, Developer Platform, is a central org at the company. So we're typically divided into several platform orgs, or several product orgs that are supporting specific applications, like our Rider org, Eats, Driver, et cetera. And then under platform engineering, developer platform, we have a couple hundred people supporting backend, mobile, code hosting, tooling, IDE, all the types of things to help our developers be more productive. If you were to kind of zoom in a little bit more, we have one mobile platform group under that. It's about 30 across Android and iOS. And those are the folks supporting developer tools for mobile engineers, are some of our common libraries and some of our common open source, like Ribs and Autodispose and some of the others that you've seen come up. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary. I'll hand it off.
So at Meta, we have about several thousand of Android app developers. And there's like several hundred developers working on the LSP stuff because we have the Meta Quest headset. For the developer experience part, we have a dedicated org called DevInfra under a VP, supporting all the internal developer tooling. That includes IDE, CI, build system, code review, everything basically. We are operating like a internal product group. So we have like customer-facing products like IDE, code review tools. We also have infrastructure supporting those internal products for build system, building for CI infra. In general, it is pretty big, but we have seen it like in the past. It was actually pretty small. Several years ago, we only have a pretty small org supporting all the developers. In the past few years, Meta has grown a lot, as well as the developer supporting functions. But I believe among all the big companies, the ratio between developers versus the developer experience engineers, we are still in a very high ratio, which means we are doing a lot of work to support our internal developers.
Cool. So I work for Airbnb, and like Uber, it's a little bit hard to say how many Android developers we have exactly. On a yearly basis, it's about 100 people that have at least one commit to our Android app. And we don't have a true developer productivity team in that sense. Rather, we sort of think about things in terms of platforms. And we have 3 sort of platforms that have the goal of making our developers more productive. So I'm part of a platform team called Android Platform, responsible for build, CI, IDE integrations. We have another platform team responsible for building UI frameworks, so you can build UI really quickly. And we have a third platform team that's really focused on creating integrations directly into the product. So if you needed to create a platform for like the first screen that you see in Airbnb and have a lot of different teams integrate into that, we have a team that owns that. Yep.
Hi. Hi. Is that working? Oh, yeah, there it is. OK. Hi, my name's Lori. I'm from Reddit, and I manage the Android platform team at Reddit. We have about, I want to say, 95 contributors to the Android repo. We have a monorepo per month, so that's kind of our number. About the same on iOS. We have, org structure. We have an Android platform team, an iOS platform team, a web platform team. We have a UI platform team that has a little bit of everybody, and they handle our design system and our accessibility. So they're very close partners to us, like our Android engineers, their Android engineers are working together on things like Compose. What else? Are we doing tech stack yet, or?
Well, we could do that next.
Okay.
You want to start?
Sure. On the Android side, let's see, we are using Bitrise for CI. We are a Gradle house. We are a big monorepo. What else do you want to know?
Any other interesting tools that you use that have an impact on developer productivity?
I think, our favorite one is Gradle Enterprise or Develocity. We love our build scans. That's the first thing.
Thanks for the plug.
They walk in the door.
I didn't mean to set you up for that.
No.
It wasn't on purpose.
It was, but I'm happy to say it. Let's see, we use Browser Stack. We are also always evaluating things and trying to decide what we want to do next. But yeah, I think we're still pretty traditional native mobile developers, and that has scaled for us pretty well so far. I think the one other thing I would say is just we have grown really, really quickly. We were definitely not 100 2 years ago, 3 years ago. We've been building up teams really, really quickly. And so that is definitely an area in which we did not have really resourced platform teams properly until the last 2 years. And I think we're closest to Airbnb in terms of how they're kind of structured, but we also are in charge of architecture modernization efforts and a whole bunch of other things in addition to the developer productivity part. And that's a team of 12.
Ben, you want to take a pretty fast on tooling stack, and what interesting tools you want to share with the community that help?
Yeah, so Airbnb is using Gradle, Android Studio, has spent a lot of time thinking about modularization, over 2,000 Gradle modules. I'd say maybe to throw in something more unique and a big investment over the past 4 years has been an IDE plugin. So we have an Android Studio plugin that we install for every single developer that has integrations into pretty much every custom piece of infrastructure that we use at Airbnb.
At Meta, we have our own virtual file system to clone the repo called EdenFS. I believe it's open source. We also open source the source control called Sapling. It's a fork of Mercurial. For IDE, we use Android Studio. For build system, we use Bug2. CI, we have our own CI system. So basically, most of the stuff are custom made.
At Uber, we have a single monorepo per platform. So our Android monorepo, it's pretty large. So we deal with a lot of scaling challenges. Over 10 million lines of code, over 10,000 modules. We are in the middle of a big migration to Bazel right now. So we're getting pretty close to the end of that journey over a several-year migration off of Buck. We make a mix of investments in local and remote development on beefy cloud machines for developers to use. We are also moving folks over to Android Studio. We've been on IntelliJ, a more kind of up-to-date version of IntelliJ Core for many years, but we're able to kind of move folks to Android Studio. We have a pretty heavy investment in modernization, so we have a lot of Compose, a lot of Kotlin, a lot of coroutines usage. a lot of our stuff is open sourced as well, our core architecture, ribs. So yeah, that covers it, I think.
Perfect. And it wouldn't be a developer productivity panel if we didn't ask, how do you measure developer productivity? Ty, why don't you?
Sure, I can start. We use, so Uber is a very metrics-driven company. Data drives all of our decisions. And so we do have a heavy mix of quantitative and some qualitative efforts as well. On the quantitative side, we're measuring things like diff throughput and code review time, cycle time, developer focus hours. There's a bunch of stuff that kind of fit in there. And then on the qualitative side, we do a semi-annual developer survey where we're tracking NPS, Net Promoter Score, as well as, we're asking developers directly how productive they are. And then we take a ton of feedback there. And so we do kind of both of those, and we apply the DevX framework, which is a more modern approach on Dora and space. And so we just recently did a big reboot of our semi-annual survey, and we're kind of following that pretty closely now. So that's pretty exciting to see, and big accomplishment. But for the first time in tracking that for 6 years, Android's at its highest ever rating from our customers, and is now a positive NPS. Yeah, thank you.
Good job, Ty. Junpei.
I think we have pretty similar approach as Uber. We have quarterly developer experience survey. Basically, send out the developer experience survey to different cohorts. We actually customize the survey a little bit for AI developers. For Android developers, they will see different survey questions. On the metric side, Meta is so obsessed with metric. We have, for example, they will have team-level metrics. For example, you will check how long it takes to build the app, how long it takes to generate a project, how many ID freezes you may have every day. There will be cross-team metrics. For example, you check how long it takes to install from you type the install command to you actually see the app started. So that includes the installation time, include the app startup time. There are also like a new company-wide metrics, basically from a very high level, how long it takes you to write a diff or write a pull request. And recently, a trend that we are thinking more about is instead of defining those metrics like duration or % bad or something like that, we are more thinking about user perceived disruptions. So we are trying to steer the metric into a space that where we can describe how users actually perceive this kind of thing. For example, if the build only takes 2 seconds, probably that doesn't count as a disruption. So this is still work in progress. We try to, migrate all of our metrics, well, not all of them, a lot of our metrics into this user perceived metrics so that we can better describe the result we got from the developer survey with what the data we have seen from our dashboard.
Yeah, I'd say Airbnb is also very similar with the mix of qualitative and quantitative. I think we've been in search of like one magical developer productivity metric. I don't think it exists, is my personal opinion. It's very hard. Instead, what's been mostly successful is just taking all the different parts of the developer journey, in particular thinking about what is blocking a developer from being productive. So as everyone sort of mentioned, builds, syncs, ID, freezes, all those things have metrics for them. Maybe sort of a unique spin that we have at Airbnb is we do sort of normalize them, sum them up, like how many builds you have per day, how many syncs you have. I think it gives you a perspective of, is it more impactful to cut sync times by 50% or improve build times by 10%? On the qualitative front, we do a biannual developer survey. And all the things that have been mentioned, I'd say my favorite part, there are 2 questions. If you could vote for the biggest thing for the platform teams to improve, we have developers rank those. And as well as what were your favorite improvements of the last 6 months?
I love those questions. We added a similar one to the end of our survey because we noticed we had no positive feedback for a while. We get a lot more of it now, but it didn't start that way when we started asking the survey, and it was really hard to have a survey when you knew you were just going to get a ton of negative feedback. But I think most of the people on the platform team joined it because they were feeling that pain, and so they were there to solve those problems. So they kind of just ate it up. Like they wanted to find the best possible things to fix. So we are also quantitative, qualitative. We have a survey. One thing that's interesting about our survey is and we're always in the process of changing these things as we grow as a company, but we have an engineering-led survey for developer productivity, and it's run by our Android Guild type of a situation. That's a much more high-trust set of people running the survey and getting the feedback for the survey and kind of figuring out what's important. And then that actually is read out to the leaders of the different platform teams all the way up leadership. And that has helped us basically take real, constructive, candid surveys and turn them into actual like roadmap elements for the different teams to resolve very specific problems. So I think that was something special about, like, we still have the like big kind of Qualtricsy type surveys too, but we needed something that was very tactical for each platform. So that's one thing. We do the cycle time stuff. I agree that I'm in the process of just tracking everything such that I can like aggregate the things together to make whatever my metric now is. Because we learned from how everyone else is doing this too, and I don't think anyone has the answer yet either. We figure out these like Franken metrics for scoring, and I'm like, there's always something wrong with them, and you find that out a few quarters later.
As you all are talking about these surveys and survey results, I mean, I wonder what it would have been like if we ran these 12 years ago where you had to use ant and eclipse. It would not have been that pretty. So we all come a long way for the folks who remember that. Okay, so let's get to some of the more funner stuff. In the last 24 months, what had the biggest impact on developer experience, developer happiness, developer productivity, however you want to call it, to share with the folks here that they can try it?
For us, I wouldn't say there was one silver bullet. I did mention we're kind of at a high point of feedback from our developers, so there has been a lot going well. But when folks ask, hey, well, what got you there? I would say it's kind of an aggregate of a lot of hard work paying off. There have been several things that we've seen a lot of benefit from. One, with such a large code base, one of the issues we really struggle with was IDE performance for very large applications. So we made a very large investment in working with JetBrains and bringing them on board, having them as a partner engineer, and burning through a huge amount of core performance issues in the IDE, and providing analytics and data to them that they were hearing all these reports from other big companies like Meta and Google and some of these, but really struggling to reproduce. And by having access to such a large code base, they were able to burn through a lot of issues that were previously unreproducible. So that would be one. Two, we've made a very heavy investment in modernization, and our developers continue to call that out as a really big win in our feedback. They love using Compose, they love using Kotlin. We've built a bunch of tooling to help with those migrations. I talked about some of those at Kotlin Conf if you want to learn a little bit more. But we give them the tooling in the IDE. We're helping them make room to get the rewards out and recognize with their leadership the value that the teams are doing. So that would be a second one. One more that's a little bit different is from a community aspect. We actually, under our Android Guild, we ran a big program to burn down memory leaks because developers had been talking for a long time around how Leak Canary was interrupting their dev flow, and that was very challenging. And so we ran this Fix-It week across the entire company. And following the results of that, not only were developers more satisfied in their iteration flow without kind of getting interrupted, but we were able to couple a bunch of business metrics to the platform side as well, which if you've worked in platform, you'll know that's very rare when you get to show direct business metrics associated with that. And so then that's gone on to kind of reap its own rewards.
I think if I have to pick one, that would be Apple Silicon. I know it's not last 2 months, but there's the supply chain issues.
It's the last 24 months, so it totally counts.
I mean, the M1 was probably out several years ago. But because of supply chain issues and then this laptop upgrade cycle, we have 3 years at Meta. So we only start to really push for the upgrade to the M series in the past 2 years. And I think that's the biggest win we have seen in the past few years, because there's a lot of issues you can solve by just simply putting more money, upgrading better hardware. Actually, the latest one that we recommend is like 64 gigabyte memory, whatever the M1 Max or M2 Max Ultra thing. And we are looking to even further upgrade that in the future. We have already benchmarked for Bug 2, right? So the build will be even 50% faster on a 128 gigabyte machine. So to me, that would be the biggest win for productivity in the past 2 years. But if I have to pick one for the largest potential, there will be Gen AI. We currently have a lot of AI efforts in the org. We are seeing a lot of really huge impact that AI can bring to us, and I think that will have the biggest impact in the future.
Yeah, at Airbnb, I think most developers would say the introduction of Compose and our screen building framework Trio. But I'll share maybe a more interesting one related directly to developer productivity in our build system. So, Airbnb, we've tried all the tricks to make our builds fast, highly optimized everything, configuration, cache, memory usage, all the typical things. And we have a highly modularized project. Quick stories, we found a technique that improved our build times and sync times by over 50%. So after you've optimized your build so much, to find something like that is really shocking. We were surprised by that. The quick summary and the intuition that we had was, we have so many modules in our project. Why do they seem to impact the build times more than all the hundreds of thousands of lines of code we have in third-party libraries? What we discovered is that you can publish ARs for all the different modules in your project. And if you figure out a way to substitute them in a way that you guarantee that module hasn't changed, you substitute the AR, you can have really big both sync and build time improvements. If you're interested by this, I actually gave a talk last droidcon, so feel free to check that out.
Cool. We do some of the things that have been said so far, and I was trying to think of something new to talk about. Obviously, the M1s were a really big deal for us too, and you should always consider those types of options when you can do the math and show them. I think that modernization and modularization has been a big deal for us for not just the build time improvements and stuff like that, but we started from a place where everyone was working on top of each other, and now they all work quite independently with their sample apps, and most of the time they are actually insulated from the problems that take longer to solve. So they're off with their 1 or 2 minute local build times, just doing their thing most of the time, and then they give us more time to fix the bigger problems that take longer for people to fix. And I think that in terms of the really big improvements that you find, if you let things get bad enough, you're going to be posting really great improvements for a while, and we're still kind of oh, look, there's another area. We're going to get some really great gains out of that too. And so we always appreciate when people open source things or put out blog posts about those things, because we are definitely learning from the community as well.
And I'm never going to forget Junpeng's answer. Money and AI. Yeah, I mean, that should have been like a mic drop. We should have just closed it all down and went home. Just kidding. Okay, so since you all brought up AI, well, Junpeng, you brought up AI. We have to talk about AI. You can't go to a conference in 2024 without talking about it. How do you use AI in your infrastructure, Ty?
Yeah, I can speak about this a little bit. So I intentionally didn't say AI in the last one because of this question, but I would start by saying, in that survey we talked about, we asked devs how much more productive they are with generative AI solutions that we provide, and 80% of people said they were at least 20% more productive in aggregate. Folks seem to think they're extremely productive thanks to this, and so we're making very heavy investments across our SDLC. We're doing things like in IDE code assistance is one part, but also investing in helping to discover information through chatbots or on our docs, adding that support, or having code review bots, generating tests, generating migrations, starting to think about identifying data races in Go, or automatically fixing linters. So we really do believe that there's a huge amount of advantages that we're going to get out of this, and our leadership all the way to the top is very bullish on those investments.
So we have a very large investment in Gen AI in general. Each org actually has its own investment. For DevInfra, we have a central, pretty big org just focusing on the most advanced AI technologies and how to apply those to the dev tooling. We built our ChatGPT-like thing internally, the chatbot. You can talk to him, talk to it. Talk to it. You can ask questions about our custom tools because there's like you cannot find answers for those Stack Overflow, Googling, anything like. And also, although the documentation and meta is okay, a lot of tools may not have that kind of documentation you need. So you can ask AI to help you understand the code base better. Now, that thing is built based up on top of a set of APIs. So not just you can use that to build a chatbot, you can also use that to build other integrations. For example, we actually have our inline completion IDE plugin for Android Studio to help Java Kotlin code writing. I think the acceptance rate last year was already 50%. We also have this AI pair programmer thing. You can basically select a code and say, explain this to me, generate this doc for this function. You can submit diffs, and then in your diff summary, you can ask AI to summarize what you try to do, right? You don't have to write all these things. You can ask AI to explain this lint error, explain this build error, CI error. A lot of work are still work in progress, but there's definitely a lot of things we are exploring as a org. I think there's a ton of opportunity for this. By the way, our Meta AI model is open sourced, Llama. If you haven't heard of it, you can look at it.
Yeah, very similar excitement at Airbnb around Gen AI. Also a big effort about getting Airbnb knowledge into our LLMs. To maybe share a different, interesting insight. One of our efforts I think had a high rate of return was getting GitHub Copilot on every developer's machine, which just meant auto-installing it and simplifying the login flow. I think sometimes you lose sight of it when you're in this space and you're really excited about it, but a lot of developers are really busy, and even asking someone to install a plugin can be a big ask. So by making that easier, we saw much higher usage, and then as others have shared, like very similar satisfaction with the tools.
So we also really like Copilot, and I think that we're probably the least far along on this and waiting for your blog posts on the things that really land. I think we are exploring all sorts of things, but we haven't really found the things that they provided so much value, they just blow people away, and we can just adopt them at scale. But I think we're likely to be very close to that. And so from the developer productivity side of things, I think we'll be talking about this very differently 6 months from now or a year from now, and all of our answers will probably be very different.
We'll pivot to something that not everyone is using it, but it's getting a lot of traction. Ty, you did a talk with me on this on a webcast a while back with Gautam on remote development environments, and I know you all have a big investment in that. How do you how do you get it to be consistent, and how do you measure the ROI from that, the return on investment for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we call our product dev pods, and we've talked about this a bit externally as well. We have some blog posts, and we've had some public talks, and a few open source things related to this. So it's a Kubernetes-based dev environment that sits on top of GCP. And what we do is we have a flavor for each one of our dev stacks. So if you're an Android developer, there's an Android flavor. And then we do a lot of cool stuff to make that very useful for our devs. We are producing those images regularly. We're creating snapshots of all of our build artifacts and IDE artifacts. We're pre-setting up all the things that you might need for your environment, like the version of the Android SDK, the JDK. And then we have a bunch, a very nice tools and web UI to get those going quickly. So what we do is we encourage developers to use multiple, so they can have these for different workflows that they're working on. Maybe one machine is set up for fixing a bug, one is for doing a code review, and one's for kind of getting through that migration that's taking them a little while. And this kind of gives them that instant context switching so that they can, not eat the cost of having to like do a rebase and build everything again and wait for that. And devs seem to like that a lot. And they're intermixing this with kind of their local workflows. At least on the Android side, we don't see it. We don't see many folks primarily going with the remote stack. They're usually mixing their local developer flow with a couple of remote machines as well. So that imaging and the snapshotting is kind of the technique we use for consistency. And then from an ROI perspective, we track a lot of metrics, right? We keep those in the IDE, so we have things like aptX, UI freezes, latency. We track those in the build, and then we can use those and we can compare and contrast local. We can look at adoption, and then we can incorporate the user feedback in CSAT as well.
I'm going to go a little off script here, and we do have the questions in advance. I mean, we're not going to come in here and wing it, except for Lori, which we had to put her on the spot. Thank you very much. Could you talk about adoption? Was it easy? Was it not? There folks, Yeah.
Yeah, so when we first rolled this out for Android, it was a prototype, and we didn't have a lot of usage outside in other tech stacks. And so we rolled out with Projector at the time, and this was before the M1s, and we were really struggling with build time and performance. And so at the moment when we did that, we saw a huge amount of organic adoption because people were just looking for anything that was faster. And over time, we actually saw a reduction in Android users specifically as like the M1s came out and that flow got better. And as we moved from using Projector into Gateway, which is IntelliJ's kind of paid for product. And then our other tech stacks that maybe use VS Code Remote, which is a little more first class, those have seen a lot more adoption. So right now we see about 40% of our users as monthly actives in our Android dev pods. But we are in the middle of moving from Gateway back to a Projector Android Studio as probably another 1 year investment while we wait for that product to mature and we figure out what the next steps look like for Android Studio Remote.
Thanks for sharing that.
Well, yeah, this is a hard question. I guess we are in a similar position as Uber. When I say Apple Silicon has the biggest impact, so you can kind of guess the local development is our focus for Android. We definitely invest a lot in remote in the past few years, starting with Projector and then moved to Gateway. Apparently, Gateway is still something that is still evolving, especially for Meta. We actually see remote has more freezes, for example. Because the way how it works, there's like 3 different components instead of just one, even though the remote machine may be even more powerful. So for the remote setup, we have something like an internal server that recycled every 16 hours, 24 hours, I can't remember. And then you can define a set of steps to prepare the machine. For example, you can say, pre-build this app. Run this emulator on this machine, and generate a project for Android Studio there. Because the preparation time is a huge problem for us. Our repo has just, the biggest module has over 100,000 modules. That's just too big. So the preparation time every day people have to do is pretty long. So definitely this has a huge benefit of just saving that kind of at least 10-minute plus time every day. But again, this is whole remote development support. I'll clarify here is that we do see pretty good support for Gateway using for our Java backend folks, which have like vanilla Java setup using IntelliJ, where they have more projects, but each project is smaller. Where on the Android side, we have few apps, but each app is humongous. Like, it's just too big. And we have a lot of customization on top of IntelliJ, which makes this kind of remote development support even harder because, like, this is still something that's not very mature. Some APIs not well supported. We use some kind of APIs in our plugin to hack around the ID performance issues. This kind of cause integration issue with Gateway. So the current status is that Gateway is well supported for Java backend folks. For Android, the focus is on local. And remote is something that we see as a long-term vision that we may continue exploring for the next few years. But yeah.
Yeah, Airbnb is 100% local Android development. We've been very interested in the remote space. We have other platforms using remote development environments. The quick answer, though, is why we haven't prioritized it is what others have alluded to. Apple Silicon is really great. The development experience is not necessarily become faster going to remote. And the difficulty in getting Android Studio to work remotely, and our developers love using Android Studio.
We're in a similar position. We're using just the M1s, M2s. I think we've also just spent more time trying to solve the context switching problems and with like more focus on areas and like just reduce that problem space for people. But the context switching and the rebasing continue to be like pain points we hear about. So like we pay attention. We're just probably not big enough for it to like be an investment we can do right now.
And for the next topic, I know we touched on some of this in our conversations, but if you wanted to share one or few IDE plugins or a tool or something readily available in the community that the folks here can just try out tomorrow, what would you recommend, Ty?
That's a great question. So I will give the plug to, if you are using any of the Uber open source tech, we do have some first class plugins that we publish to the marketplace, like the Rooz plugin, for the subset of folks that are using that. That's very useful. Similarly, our DI system that's open sourced and on KSP now, we have a companion IDE plugin for that as well. If you're looking for non kind of Uber related ones, there have been some useful tools for building IDE plugins itself, like that can help you inspect PSI and do some interesting things there. If you want to learn more about that, my colleague gave a talk on building your first plugin earlier, so I'd recommend watching the video there.
Unfortunately, we have a lot of internal plugins, but most of them are not open sourced. We have about maybe 40, 50-ish custom plugins just for Meta internal. If I have to recommend something that everybody can use now, probably I'll just try the performance testing. So if your user have any issue with IDE performance, the performance testing plugin provides user a way to capture CPU snapshot and memory snapshot. Then you can open that in the profiler to understand where the bottleneck is and then find out fixes. The PSI one is also very useful. There's also one for you to view indexes. If you have a huge repo, the indexing is slow, you want to find out why it's slow, there's like index viewer. Of course, there's also the bug plugin that we kind of open source, but stopped for a while because bug 2, but it still works. If you use bug 2, that plugin provides syntax highlighting, auto completion, go to definition for bug files. You can also invoke bug commands from the plugin. It creates run configurations, integrate with prod generation. Of course, that, as I said, is mostly in bug 1. We do plan to open source the bug 2 component once we finish the migration internally.
Yeah. So also at Airbnb, we mostly focus on our own plugins, so maybe an unsatisfying answer. But I will maybe sort of echo what Ty was saying with a different spin, which is we've been building our plugins using Compose. And so I know many of the folks here in the audience are using Compose. So it's very easy to get started building a IDE plugin, because you get to use the same language that you're using to build an Android app. So I wouldn't be afraid to jump into it and try things out. I will share maybe one of our developers' favorite features that we built that may or may not be applicable to your project. And it's to help with the context switching problem. So we have thousands of modules, and we support loading a subset of them into the IDE. Figuring out which ones to pick is difficult. So we had this sort of hacky idea, which is you can run a git diff command to figure out what modules have been changed locally, and in a single click of a button, set up a sink that just loads those modules. And you can see how this is really useful if you're switching between multiple branches, maybe helping out someone with a code review. All you have to do now is click one button, and you get the exact right set of modules loaded for you.
We really like that one, too. We have something similar that I think you came out with first and talked about, and we were like, oh, look, same sort of thing. We have a whole bunch of plugins and tooling that we've worked on in-house that we're trying to get back to a point where we can open source stuff again. So I think there's one of them that I'm really hoping we get to do soon that we're trying to work on this quarter. And it basically allows, like, we call it /hub, and it allows commands like on the PR to retry only what failed and do stuff like that. What's really interesting about that one is that we added a whole bunch of observability behind it to go, why are people having to retry stuff? And like, what exactly were they retrying? And that gave us like hot zones of new areas for us to go and resolve problems with. So instead of guessing why people are just like continuously redoing stuff in hopes that it works, we can actually be really tactical about like, oh, retries are for this particular reason. And that's just one of the commands. We also did things like directional cherry picks so that human error stopped in certain conditions, all sorts of stuff like that. Oh, another one is wait for the next branch cut and then merge your stuff. So you could just like plan for that in advance. Those are just nice quality of life things that our developers have been really, really excited about, and they come up with new commands all the time, and so we're just continuing to extend that kind of thing.
I'll throw one in here too. We have the build scan plugin. If you don't know about it, it's a free service, free UI that goes along with your build. You run a -- scan with it and see what's happening with it.
No one mentioned it, but the Copilot plugin, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we needed to mention that one, but no.
We talked all about
We did.
value add, but then no one said it as an IDE plugin. So
That is true. That is true. In our last topic for the day, I hear Uber and Meta and folks talk about this all the time, which is, how do you measure a quality of a feature, but at the same time you want acceleration, you want velocity. So how do you balance at Uber, Ty? How do you balance quality versus velocity?
I would say it's something we're trying to get better at. There are always efforts on kind of both sides. We've historically had a lot of urgency and like pressure down on the velocity side, and sometimes quality falls a little bit second. But quality is incredibly important for us because the reliability of the Uber app is really important because the business model is a utility for folks. And so there have been a lot of things introduced, like that you might expect, like code coverage or other tools and techniques like that start to give you some view of quality. And you could kind of combine that with things like crash-free rates and ANR rates and memory-free rates. So we've had some of those app health for a while, but that's not really code quality. That's just kind of your overall reliability. But we are now investing in the direction of code quality scoring or code health scoring. If you saw Valera's talk from Slack earlier, they have a couple years of maturity in this space, and we're very bullish in that direction. I think Airbnb might also take a similar direction as that. So I think that's the long-term view that we have, that we'll try to balance velocity by also scoring what we think is important from the platform side and exposing that to teams at several levels of visibility, from the PR itself up to leadership dashboards.
At Meta, I think we value a lot on move fast. Actually, I'm wearing a move fast t-shirt inside. So that's why we value a lot on the velocity. We truly try to make developers deliver features faster. But at the same time, quality is important, right? So we basically have two ways of improving quality. One is this: we add some process, right? There's like previous reviews, kind of review that you must go through, ensure that you have the right setup for your project. And there's also, at the code level, we have linters, formatters enforced before you land in the diff. There's also tooling built around something called diff risk score that tells you if you land this diff, how risky it would be, how likely it cause any production issues. They are also like, quality-wise, we also enforce more test writing. There's like this, in a huge monolith, there's a problem how you can select a bunch of tests that can most reflect the risk of your diff, right? Sometimes the test could pass all the time. So we have unit tests, Roboelectric, screenshot tests, instrumentation, and also end-to-end tests. We run those tests on the diff time, landing time. Also, we have a lot of tests running at the continuous, like every 15 minutes, you get a test run and make sure it's good. Otherwise, we'll send you a task saying that you have to fix it. Yeah, I think definitely we value velocity more, but at the same time, want to make sure that you deliver features in good quality.
Yeah, I think the fun part of working on a platform team is I sort of view the goal is to try to come up with solutions that you don't have to choose between quality and velocity. We have a phrase at Airbnb called the paved path for how we think about building infrastructure. And the idea is if you can get to point A to point B in many different ways, but an infrastructure team can pave a way to get there, you're going to get there faster and you're going to get there safer. A concrete example is in our screen building framework based on Compose and Mavericks called Trio. We have the concept of mocks. So a mock lets you go freeze the state of the app, jump to that screen if you're testing it, but also on CI it enables automatic testing of screenshot tests and automatically testing interactions. What we realize is if you can make it really easy to generate these mocks, you're both increasing developers' productivity and testing, you're increasing the quality from your code coverage. So these are like my favorite things, is when you can think of an idea that you don't have to choose between the two.
I like that. I think we have a similar posture. In the last 2 years, at least on the platform team side of things, we've been really focused on stability and performance, like one after another, quarter after quarter. It's one focus or the other, and they're really intertwined. So I'm actually really proud of the fact that we've been able to move stability and performance metrics while most of the work we do introduces more friction in order to have higher quality. So for an example of that, like you start with multi-hour build times and like unit test coverage in the teens, and you're like, I need to add all that unit test coverage at the same time as not introducing more build times. That has been those have been really big problems for us to solve, but we had to do them at the same time. And then on the other side, I think I did not used to really appreciate the qualitative feedback as much, but that has actually helped us feed the velocity conversation more. So we say things like, if you adopt Compose and some of these other golden path things that we're suggesting that are more modern, look at these teams who have done that, and they are like the Android side is lapping the iOS side, or they can do it with less engineering time or talent, or even maybe bring it down a level in terms of like we introduce Anvil, and now we're not having so much dagger pain, and you can have a senior engineer on a project lead it instead of a staff engineer. Those types of conversations have actually helped us with the velocity and like product conversations that we need to have to fix the quality issues.
Great. And we did it. We did all the 6-7 topics in the 40, 50 minutes of time. And, thanks for everyone for joining the end of the day. And thanks to the panelists for participating, especially Lori for subbing in for Aida. And thank you all. And thanks everyone for coming. If you want to learn more about Develop Productivity, we have the Develop Productivity Summit, DP Summit coming up. And Ty is doing a talk on how Uber is using AI in their case studies and lessons learned. Junpeng, when you mentioned the diff risk, the PR risk, Rui Abru from your productivity team submitted a very interesting talk on that. I think that's going to get in. And there's a talk from Airbnb AI as well. And there's talks from last year on dpe.org that you all can check out. And I want to thank, as we're closing it out, I want to thank Greg and the droidcon team for continuing to develop the community. I mean, it is one of my favorite conferences. I've been to droidcon London, I've been to droidcon New York. I highly recommend you all to check it out and meet your peers in the Android industry in the East Coast and in Europe if you can. The Berlin one I heard is off the hook with 2,000 people or something. Yeah, thank you for continuing to do that. Ty and I, we're going to get the meetup going again, the Android GDG. We got Zach K. If Zach K is here, and John Lai, they're going to help us out. Are they here? No, they didn't stick around for, okay, remember, they didn't stick around for our panel. Anyhow, thank you all for coming, and have a great day.